then Agrippa said to Paul, "You may speak in your defense." So Paul, gesturing with his hand, started his defense, saying, "I am fortunate, King Agrippa, that you are the one hearing my defense today against all of these accusations made by the Jewish leaders, for I know that you are an expert on all Jewish customs and controversies. Now please, listen to me patiently." Whew. Things are getting serious. Friends, we've reached the end of our summer series on Acts, and we have seen all the way through the series that the kingdom of Jesus, the church of Jesus, the gospel of Jesus is spreading and growing all the way across northwestern Asia and southeastern Europe, with big breakthrough and big backlash, as Ruth so rightly put it last week. We've seen examples of the spread, among Jewish people, among Samaritans, an Ethiopian man, Romans, Greeks, the lot. We've seen a few examples of how Paul interacted with the people that he visited on his missionary journeys. We've seen things that he did that bear fruit. We saw things that he did that challenged him and put barriers up in his way. And today we're going to look at how all of the things kind of come together and contribute to where Paul finds himself now, needing to give a defense to King Agrippa, and actually what that defense is. But before we get into it all, I would love to bless you. We see in the Bible that blessings are powerful, so I bless you in the name of Jesus to know Jesus even more wonderfully today. May God bless you and protect you. May he smile upon you and be gracious to you. May he show you his favor and give you his peace. In the name of Jesus, say it with me. May it be. Good times. So as I read a second ago, Paul is required to give a defense of his actions in spreading the gospel to this dude, King Agrippa, and we're going to look at why he needs to do that and what he does. But starting how he got there is helpful for us. So I mentioned a couple of weeks ago when I was with you that Luke, when he's writing, he writes an accurate and well-ordered account. Those are the two ways that he describes it, and he's really helpful. He does this thing a lot where, this thing that he writes helps you to make sense of this thing, and that helps you to make sense of this thing, and that helps you to make sense of this thing, and actually all of those things go together to help you make sense of this thing. And it's this really big, helpful, informative snowball, and we love those snowballs. We saw in Philippi, when Paul was there, that there was a spiritual warfare context, but the big thing that came out was this racial, ethnic component, as some people saw the gospel of Jesus as a threat to their Roman culture and also to their wallets. And then when Paul was in Athens, even though their religiosity was mentioned, the actual religion didn't take the main focus. The main focus was reserved for their worldview. So just that we're all on the same page here, would you appreciate a little 2-minute refresher on Epicurean and Stoic philosophy? Yay, said everyone so enthusiastically. We love that. Okay, Epicureans are all about sensory, feeling. They have a do whatever makes you feel good bottom line. That's what they want. They want to feel good. So it's it is an egoist hedonism, but it's not going wild. It's a reserved, calm peace. It's less about chasing every single little pleasure and more the avoidance of pain and choosing a quiet, simple life. The kind of quiet, simple life that Paul talks to the Thessalonians in 1 Thessalonians 4:11. That's something that they would have found relatable. For Epicureans, the gods are distant and don't get involved and don't meddle in human affairs, which is good for them because they want to forge their own path. And they believe that humans are just a collection of atoms that are going to do atomy things until they are all done doing atomy things, at which point they expire and the human that they make up also expires. And then since there is no sensing or feeling anything after death, once you die, it's game over for an Epicurean. Stoics have a lot in common, but a lot in contrast also. They're not so much about the feelings, but they have a knowledge, reason, logic base, and they're not fortunate in their own path. They see a predetermined ethical and moral code as defined by what they call the logos, or the word. And later Stoics even saw that logos as divine intervention guiding them. Stoics see people, though, as like physical beings, like physical things in a physical world, in a material world, less bothered with the spiritual and the feelingsy stuff. And they see existence as cyclical. Do you know, like people are born into the physical world, and then they die and exit the physical world, and that just kind of goes on repeat. But when you die, you exit the physical world, and you cease to exist. So for both worldviews that Paul encountered in Athens, once you die, you're dead, you're done, GG. So summing up Paul's experience, yes, he mentions that they are religious, but the resurrection of Jesus that Paul presents in Athens challenged their worldview the most. They just could not hang with that. Some people found it laughable. Some people were curious. To be fair, some people did believe, but it was such a challenge to their worldview. And then in Ephesus, we saw that dudes were concerned about their wallets for sure, but the main focus was Jesus versus Artemis and how Jesus would impact the worship of Artemis and the temple of Artemis, and the whole spiritual warfare dynamic was the big thing that Luke wants to highlight in that visit to Ephesus. These are the ingredients in the recipe that contribute to Paul getting arrested and then ending up in front of Agrippa. And we can see those play out, not exactly in this order, but in this order. Firstly, there are Jewish men from Asia, and they have beef with Paul, as every Jewish man in Asia seemed to at some point. And they see Paul in the temple in Jerusalem, but they also saw Paul with a Gentile man just in the city, and they make an assumption that because Paul was in the temple and Paul was with this dude, that Paul must have brought this dude to the temple and therefore defile it. And they can't have that, and they freak out, and it starts a riot. And Paul gets arrested. And he's about to be beaten by the Romans to force a confession out of him. And when we see that Paul has learned from the Philippi thing. Because in Philippi, Paul announced that he was a Roman citizen after he had been beaten and imprisoned. But this time, no. He's not going to wait until after he's been beaten and imprisoned. But he does wait till the very last minute for nice dramatic effect. They have tied him up. They are about to beat him. And he's like, P.S., are you allowed to do this to your Roman citizen? Because I'm a Roman citizen by birth. And they freak out. And they don't know what to do with him. So they hand him back to the Jewish High Council. And the Jewish High Council is made up of Pharisees and Sadducees, and for the full story on their history and why those groups exist, and Brian's message on the period between the Old and New Testament from the Bible Overview series that we just finished just before the summer is glorious, but the TLDR version is that the Pharisees are Jewish purists, and the Sadducees are influenced by Greek thinking, the type of Greek thinking that Paul met in Athens that says there is no resurrection. Pharisees believe in the resurrection of the dead, not Jesus' resurrection from the dead, but they believe in the concept. Sadducees don't. So Paul remembers his time in Athens, and he brings up resurrection, and they start debating and fighting among themselves, and it gets heated, so much so that the Romans are scared that they're going to rip Paul apart. So then they take him back, and now the Romans have Paul, and it's like pass the parcel with Paul, and nobody knows what to do with him. Jesus knows what to do with him. That night, Jesus meets with Paul, and he says, be encouraged, Paul. Just as you have been a witness to me here in Jerusalem, you must preach the good news in Rome as well. All right, let's go. Jesus has an assignment for Paul, and one that he has been preparing Paul for. I'm the kind of person who I get focused in on the assignment that is right in front of me at the moment. Like when I'm working, I just love to get locked in. Do you know when you're like working and the time goes and you're like, oh, it's time, I've already missed my train. Because you're just locked in. I love being locked in. I love focusing on the assignment that's in front of me. I'm not the sort of person who tends to show like loads of ambition to be like, oh, this is what I want my next step to be. In 5 years, 10 years time, this is where I see myself. I'm just focused on the thing that is in front of me. But then I do the thing that's in front of me, and there is something that's next for me. And quite often I have noticed that that last thing I did prepared me for this thing that I'm doing now. And that thing I'm doing now is going to prepare me for the thing that I'm going to do next. And it kind of just goes like that. And sometimes it's like all of those things that I did, boom, they have prepared me for this big thing that I'm about to do. Works like this. So the example is that I used to be a primary school teacher. And when I was a primary school teacher, like pretty much all of my career was me being a substitute teacher. And back in those days, the old days, where I was able to get a maternity leave pretty much every year. The job market was less rough for people trying to find teaching work in those days. And I usually found a maternity leave for a year, which meant I started a new school every year, started a new job every year. And that meant I needed to get to know the policies and the practices of a school really fast. And I ended up being like the kind of dude who would like teach science to like every class in the school because I covered the teachers like out of class prep time. So I needed to learn every kid in that school's name fast. And I actually got really good at it because I had like 4 years in a row of like doing this thing. And then, fast forward to 2018, and my wife Jamie and I got jobs in Portland, Oregon, at a church that had like a big kids ministry that was probably about the size of like a big primary school. Like when we moved there were maybe like 600 kids in the church. We had 180 kids volunteers. And I was like, yo, I need to get to know this church and their policies and practices, and I need to know every kid's name fast. I was like, hey, hold on a minute. God has been preparing me for this. I actually have a lot of practice at this. When I was in third year of uni, I studied first semester in Montpellier in France, and then my second semester in Granada in Spain. When I did a master's, I lived in Hungary for a couple of months. I had done the learn to live in a new culture 3 times. Also moved from Ireland to Scotland, let's say 4 times. So then by the time I moved to America, God had been preparing me for that. I had practiced that. Now, I wasn't sitting there in the primary school being like, I hope I'm only here for a year so that I can move on because one day I want to be a kids pastor in America. No, of course, I don't know that. It's only with hindsight that I'm looking back on that and I'm seeing how God was preparing me for what he had for me. And he's been doing that with Paul. All the things that Paul experienced on his missionary journeys are contributing to what is happening here so that Paul knows how to respond. In Ephesus, Jesus is seen as a major threat to Artemis's temple. But the Jerusalem version of that is that Paul's association with the Ephesian dude leads people to conclude that Jesus and his dudes are a threat to Yahweh's temple. Now, obviously, that's not true, but that's the conclusion that they jump to. In Philippi, we saw the racial, ethnic component and why some people rejected Jesus because you had to do Roman things in Philippi. But in the Jerusalem version of that is that you have to operate under the Jewish rules in that culture. So Paul has operated under the ethnic and racial thing before. He knows what to do. So when he goes to Jerusalem and that same thing happens, he knows what to do. He's been there, he's done that before. And finally in Athens, dudes couldn't accept the resurrection because of their physical worldview. But Paul has appeared in front of the council in Athens. He knows how to do that thing. And he knows what to say. And he's done that. So the Jerusalem version, where they're rejecting, or at least some people are rejecting the concept of resurrection. Both groups are rejecting Jesus' resurrection. Paul knows how to operate in those circumstances. God has been preparing him. He has practice for this. He knows what to do. And sometimes we can get caught up in thinking that when it comes to Jesus-y stuff and doing Jesus-y stuff, only our formal training counts. And maybe you're like, yo, I'm not a pastor. I haven't been to seminary. So what kind of Jesus-y things am I going to do? Or I haven't been to Scotland Bible School. How am I supposed to know what to say? Now, I am not discrediting the formal training. Seminary has been helpful for me. I would love everybody to do Scotland Bible School because I have seen how that impacts a dude. the formal training is important and helpful. But do not sweat the informal training that God has been doing in your life and in your heart that leads you to be able to be effective where he has placed you now. And I would be so confident that only you have got those things prepared in your heart, those ingredients in your recipe to make you the most fruitful where he has placed you. Do not sweat the life experience that he has given you so that you can be effective where you are. And it's good to think about these things because I wasn't sitting in that school thinking, oh, cool. I was thinking, why can't I get a permanent job? What is wrong with me? I've got this CV where it's like 1 year of a job, 1 year of a job, 1 year of a job. I'm going to send it to a head teacher, and they're going to be like, yo, like nobody wants to keep him. I'll pass too. That's what I was thinking. But with hindsight, I can see how God was preparing me for something that he had for me. So look back. How has God been preparing you? What has he been preparing you for? What are you going to be able to do better than anybody else because of what God has been doing in your heart? You have an assignment, and Paul has an assignment, and he is prepared. He is, however, not done with his preparation. Jesus gave him an assignment to go and testify about him in Rome. So, to help him get prepared, Jesus presents him with a bunch of opportunities to present the gospel to a bunch of Roman people. First Felix, then Festus. Finally, we have a defense to give to King Agrippa. And before we get into what Paul actually says, a little reminder of what we read earlier. Because then Agrippa says to Paul, you may speak in your defense. So Paul, gesturing with his hand, started his defense. I am fortunate, King Agrippa, that you are the one hearing my defense today against all of these accusations made by the Jewish leaders. For I know that you're an expert on all Jewish customs and controversies. Now, please listen to me patiently. It sounds really serious when we read it. It sounds serious. And to be fair, it kind of is serious. Like, Paul's life is in this dude's hands. But I also kind of think he's having a little bit of a laugh and a little bit of a poke at the people who have brought these charges against him. I think that because Agrippa and Festus have already had a little side chat, and they have concluded that Paul has not done anything wrong. He hasn't broken any Roman laws. There's no need for this hearing. But Paul has appealed to Caesar, as is his right as a Roman citizen. He is now entitled to a hearing with Caesar. Festus cannot deny him that hearing. Festus has to send him. Problem, you can't send a dude to a hearing with Caesar if he hasn't done anything wrong. He's no charges to send this dude to Caesar with. Like, Festus is like, yo, I can't even fill out the paperwork on this one, bro. Like, Agrippa, can you help me figure out what I'm supposed to do here? And then Paul chimes in, and he's like, Agrippa, I'm so fortunate that you are here to hear my defense of these shocking, maybe non-existent charges today. What will we do? I know that you're an expert on all the Jewish things and all the Jewish things that Jewish people fight about. What are we like? So if you can help us figure out what, if anything, I did wrong, that'd be really helpful. So I'm going to talk now. You should listen really carefully because these charges are so tricky, we might miss it. And he's having a little bit of fun, but like it is serious. Like, Paul's life is in this dude's hands. And Paul is also right to say that Agrippa is an expert on Jewish things. When we get acquainted with Agrippa, we'll see what Paul's talking about. So Acts 26 identifies him as King Agrippa, but his real name was Marcus Julius Agrippa. Sometimes with these kings in Judea, like we might like jump to an assumption that they are Jewish. And Agrippa seems to have some care, some sympathies for the Jewish cause, but this is a Roman dude. And an elite Roman dude, grew up in the Roman court, imperial court. He is King Agrippa II. His dad was also King Agrippa, although Acts 12 identifies him using the moniker Herod, kind of showing that he's in that like King Herod zone, in that line. Both Kings Agrippa ruled Judea and Palestine, and now it's Agrippa II's turn. He was childhood friends with Claudius, who later became emperor. He's dead now. Nero is the emperor at this time of these events, but he was friends with an emperor. Like, this is an important dude in an important position, Roman dude. And he's there because he has got like a certain amount, like actually a high amount of political savvy and diplomatic skills. Like his dad, he knew how to use the Jewish people to further his own political gains. And he knew when he needed to come in and stamp out a Jewish rebellion. And he could lord it over the Jews, as our Lord would say, the Gentiles do, as good as any Roman person. But he also knows when to treat him sweet and pander to him a bit and keep him on side, just so that they'll maybe have a few less rebellions and make his life a little bit easier. And this runs in his family. His dad, Agrippa I, actually used his diplomatic skills to make sure that the emperor at the time, this dude Gaius, didn't put up a statue of himself in Yahweh's temple and therefore defile it, because he knew the Jewish people would freak out. But you would need to have considerable diplomatic skills to convince the most powerful man in the world not to stroke his own ego and keep your position and your head. He knows what he's doing. And he protected the temple. That's the dad. King Agrippa II, he has skin in the temple game too. He funded a bunch of renovations in the temple. So if these charges are being brought against Paul, you defile the temple, the Agrippas have skin in the temple game. They seem to care, and they're going to look after the temple. So it seems like Agrippa II cares about the Jewish cause, has sympathies towards the Jewish cause, maybe dabbles in a little bit of Judaism when it is convenient and advantageous for him. So is it a good thing for Paul to have someone hearing his defense who is sympathetic to the Jewish cause? Paul seems to think he's very fortunate. But is he fortunate? Remember, the Jewish people are bringing the charges, and the Agrippas have a habit of doing stuff to please the Jewish people. Agrippa I, called King Herod, in Acts chapter 12, is the one. So this dude's dad is the one who killed Jesus' brother James and put Peter in jail and was planning to kill him too. Paul's life is in the hands of a dude whose dad killed Jesus' brother and was planning to kill Peter. Are you feeling confident, Paul? Whew, I don't know. This is serious. And as Paul goes on to his defense, we know that he probably needs to tread pretty carefully to make sure he doesn't end up like St. James. We're going to see what he says in his defense. We're going to read the rest of chapter 26. It's a bunch. I can see why Paul asked them to listen patiently. And they both ended up interrupting him. So please listen more patiently than they did. Paul says, as the Jewish leaders are well aware, I was given a thorough Jewish training from my earliest childhood among my own people and in Jerusalem. And if they would admit it, they know that I have been a member of the Pharisees, the strictest sect of our religion. And now I am on trial because of my hope in the fulfillment of God's promises made to our ancestors. In fact, that's why the 12 tribes of Israel zealously worship God night and day, and they share the same hope I have. Yet, Your Majesty, they accuse me for having this hope. Why does it seem incredible to any of you that God can raise the dead? I used to believe that I ought to do everything I could to oppose the very name of Jesus the Nazarene. In fact, I did that in Jerusalem. Authorized by the leading priest, I caused many believers there to be sent to prison, and I cast my vote against them when they were condemned to death. Many times, I had them punished in the synagogues to get them to curse Jesus. I was so violently opposed to them that I even chased them down in foreign cities. One day when I was on one such mission to Damascus, armed with the authority and commission of the leading priests, about noon, Your Majesty, I was on the road, and a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, shone down on me and my companions. We all fell down, and I heard a voice saying to me in Aramaic, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It's useless for you to fight against my will. Who are you, Lord? I asked. And the Lord replied, I'm Jesus, the one you're persecuting. Now get to your feet, for I have appeared to you to appoint you as my servant and witness. Tell people that you have seen me, and tell them what I will show you in the future, and I will rescue you from both your own people and the Gentiles. Yes, get this, Saul of Tarshish, like Pharisee Judaism guy. I am sending you to the Gentiles to open their eyes so that they may turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God. Then they will receive forgiveness for their sins and be given a place among God's people who are set apart by faith in me. And so, King Agrippa, I obeyed that vision from heaven. I preached first to those in Damascus, then in Jerusalem, and then throughout all Judea, and also to the Gentiles, that all must repent of their sins and turn to God and prove they have changed by the good things they do. Some Jews arrested me in the temple for preaching this, and they tried to kill me. But God has protected me right up to this present time so that I can testify to everyone, from the least to the greatest. I teach nothing but what the prophets and Moses said would happen, that the Messiah would suffer and be the first to rise from the dead, and in this way announce God's light to the Jews and the Gentiles alike. Suddenly Festus shouted, Paul, you are insane. Too much study has made you crazy. But Paul replied, I am not insane, most excellent Festus. What I am saying is the sober truth. And King Agrippa knows about these things. I speak boldly, for I am sure these events are familiar to him, for they weren't done in the corner. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know you do. King Agrippa interrupted him. Do you think you can persuade me to become a Christian so quickly? Paul replied, whether quickly or not, I pray to God that both you and everyone here in this audience might become the same as I am, except for these chains. Then the king, the governor, Bernice, and all the others stood and left, and as he went out, they talked it over and agreed, like, this man hasn't done anything to deserve death or imprisonment. And Agrippa said to Festus, he could have been set free if he hadn't appealed to Caesar. If you were Paul, and your life is in this dude's hands, where would you start? There's a lot of this that's about resurrection-y stuff, so maybe here's a deep dive into the theology and the mechanics of the resurrection, here's how the resurrection works. Or maybe you just want to talk about Jesus and give a classic gospel presentation about Jesus' life and his death and all things, Where would you start? Where would you even start? Well, we know from just looking at how Paul presented the gospel to the council in Athens, that two values that he holds is he wants to make sure that the gospel message is relatable to a dude, that they can see themselves in it, but also has enough contrast that it's going to give them cause to do a little bit more self-reflection. So it has to be relatable, and it has to have some contrast. That's what he does. And he does it through sharing his own personal story. His story is powerful. And your story is powerful. Friends, just like we're not going to sweat the informal training that we get from our life experience that God has done in us, we are not going to sweat the power of your story. Never underestimate the power of your story. If you have given your life to Jesus, you are walking, talking, living, breathing proof that Jesus rescues people out of a kingdom of darkness and plants them beautifully into a kingdom of light. Power, my dudes. Never underestimate that. Paul makes it personal. Do you know? He could have done the robust theological deep dive. He has that in his locker. But instead, he just tells them his own story of how he became a Christian and what Jesus has done for him. Because given a theological deep dive and those abstract concepts, or a personal human story, people will connect with the personal human story every single time. And that's how Paul does it. He helps people to see where they fit inside his story. He's talking about himself as the example of someone who was so committed and zealous to the Jewish cause, but then met Jesus and discovered that Jesus is the logical, right conclusion, the natural way to go if you believe Moses and the prophets. And he's going to start to talk about the prophets to King Agrippa before he gets interrupted. He wants the people in the audience to see those guys who are freaking out. I used to freak out, but then this happened and actually it's good. Jesus worked in me. This is a good way that people can go. This is something that we can do without riots and without beatings and without prison and without any of that. This is a good, normal, natural way. And when we find ourselves in Jesus-y conversations, I think we actually have it easier than Paul, because he is doing this in the context of a defense hearing, talking to men in authority over him who, I know that there's like the innocent until proven guilty thing, but it's going to be different being in a defense hearing than when we have those Jesus-y conversations. Because most of the time when we have those Jesus-y conversations, we are talking to people that usually that we already know, like our family, our friends, our classmates, our colleagues. Maybe you're in a choir and it's somebody you're in a choir with. Maybe you're in a club. Maybe you play football, whatever it is. Usually, you are going to know that person, so there's already trust there. There's already a relationship there. There's already relational currency there. And they are much, 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 much more likely to respect you. Whether they accept your message or not isn't up to you. Telling your story is your part. Responding is their part. And we see a variety of responses. Like Festus is just like, yo, Paul, you are nuts, bro. I'm not having this. But Agrippa wants to know, it's kind of curious, Agrippa wants to know if Paul thinks that he could persuade him so quickly. Like maybe it's going to take you a bit longer to persuade me, Paul, but it still leaves the option to persuade him open. It's not a hard no. It's not a yes, but it's not a hard no. We see a variety of responses, which at this point in the book of Acts, and at this point of our series, is probably to be expected. During this series, in every single message, we have noted that the gospel is spreading. The church of Jesus is growing and advancing, and there is much fruit and much opposition. Big breakthrough, big backlash. And something that God has been bringing to us again and again in this series is that we can expect there to be backlash. It kind of just comes with the territory. And we shouldn't be afraid of it. Because sometimes knowing why the backlash is happening changes the game. When I was a teacher and I couldn't get a full-time job, I was thinking, what is wrong with me? Like, no school will touch me. I can't get a full-time job. And then I get a maternity cover, and then I go work in a school, and I get on great, but no one will touch me. Like, what is wrong with me? And sometimes when we have like those like difficult times, and there's not like an explanation for it, our little human brains with our little human negativity bias can go to the worst case scenario. And I can conclude that I must be an awful teacher. And nobody wants to touch me, nobody wants to work with me. And that my head teachers must be giving me terrible references. Or it leaves us open to the enemy's attack and the lies that can come with that. And being like, yeah, you're useless as a teacher. Why do you even bother wasting your time? Yo, Crooksy, teaching, that's your third degree, right, bro? You're wasting everyone's time. Think of the money that you've wasted on this. Think of the time that you've wasted on this. What are you even doing? And those are the things that we can end up vulnerable to. And I think especially when we are doing Jesus-y things, I think especially when we are telling our story, we can end up being vulnerable to those attacks. And if we can't recognize why they are happening, it leaves us in a worse position. Instead, we want to recognize that especially, if you have told your story to someone, and whether they accepted it or not, you have shared living, walking, talking, breathing yourself proof that Jesus saves and turns people's lives around. There is so much power in that, and the enemy hates it. He's going to come at you and he's going to bite you, and it's going to be rough. But at the same time, we know what happened in the book of Acts. They spread the gospel. There was fruit and there was backlash, and the gospel still continued to spread and Jesus still won. Especially if you have shared your story with someone, and whether they have accepted it or not, if you have felt an attack coming after that, this could well be a sign of how powerful that time was and how much it's impacted people, that the enemy wants to silence you and shut you up. Don't let him do it. Don't let him do it. Instead, we can take this backlash as the compliment that it is. That you are like a living, walking, talking, breathing threat to the enemy and the kingdom of darkness. And that you're doing great things for the kingdom. And that he wants to keep you quiet, but this is a time when we stand firm, knowing that God is working with his power through you. Experiencing backlash is not fun, especially an extended season of it. But often, it is a good sign. And it gives me reason to be like, oh, I kind of get now what happens when the apostles say that they can rejoice in the suffering, because they know that Jesus is being effective through them, and the enemy pushing back is in some way a good sign of God being effective through them. If that is something that you can relate to, don't be scared of the backlash. Don't let it steal your voice. Tell your story. It's so powerful. Don't let it stop or halt your actions. They are so powerful. So often that backlash is a good sign. Not fun, but a good sign. And when it feels hard, remember the book of Acts. That people preached, the gospel spread, there was much fruit, there was much backlash, and Jesus still won, and his church still grew, and the gospel still spread, and the victory is still his. And take hope and take courage and stand firm. No matter how hard it gets, no matter how much you might feel like you're going to give up, don't give up. Keep walking. Keep going. Because, like in those days, the gospel is still spreading. The kingdom is still growing. Jesus is still winning. And at the moment, it feels like the pace is picking up on just how much he is winning. So we want to be ready. So in that case, I've got a little challenge for you today. Here's two questions. First, where is your main place of mission? Maybe it's probably most likely it might be your workplace or your place of study. But it might be that you're in a choir, or you're in, you play on a football team, or whatever it is. Where is your main mission place? And what has God done in you to make you effective there? I did the jumps leading to there, but it's usually most helpful to think, this is where Jesus has put me. How did I get there? And work backwards. Good to reflect on these things, answer those two questions, reflect on them, and let your confidence be boosted. When we moved to Portland, and I thought I have 600 kids to pastor, I have 180 volunteers to lead. That could have been daunting. But when I was like, God has been preparing me for this for the guts of 10 years. That lets me know that he sees me. That lets me know that he has been working in me, and that gives me confidence in him that because he thinks I've got what it takes, that I've got what it takes. Let your confidence be boosted so that you can be effective for God's kingdom and see it spread in your mission place, wherever that may be. Friends, we're going to move into a time of response, but first I'm going to pray for us real quick. Jesus, we bless you. We bless your work. We bless your church. We bless your gospel, and we say thank you that you see our whole lives. Our days are numbered, and you know them, and you are working in the details. Things that we miss along the way, and we only realize how wonderful you are in hindsight. Jesus, we declare now that you are wonderful. And I pray, open our eyes to see how beautifully you're working in our hearts, how beautifully you're working in our lives, how great you are in developing our character, our skills, whatever it may be, so that you've put us in the place where you've put us now so we can be effective. Jesus, we are here. We are about your business. We want to see your kingdom come. Help us to be an effective part of that. Amen.